I never thought my life would take such a drastic turn. I'm John, a 31-year-old guy working in IT. My ex-wife, Claire, who's 35, and I were married for 5 years. We tied the knot right after I graduated college at 21. I was head over heels in love with her, believing we had a happy marriage. Our relationship seemed perfect. We rarely fought, and our sex life was fulfilling. At least that's what I thought. A couple of months before I discovered her affair, Claire's behavior changed dramatically. She grew distant, and our once passionate nights dwindled to awkward silences. We went from daily intimacy to barely touching each other. The last 2 weeks were the worst. No intimacy at all. My gut told me something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. Then, one day, Claire left her phone out. It was still open to a message with a naked selfie she had sent to an unknown number. My heart sank, but I kept my cool. I took pictures of her phone with mine, capturing her entire conversation with some guy from the gym, a gym I was paying for. They were screwing in our bed while I was at work. I felt like a fool, but I decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, I made my move silently. The following Saturday, Claire left for her supposed double yoga class. I knew she'd be gone for 3 hours, so I packed my things and left. I had already consulted a divorce attorney, and since I was only 25 with no significant assets, the divorce wouldn't be complicated. Claire's father had left her $200K, which I had no claim to. We had no kids, even though she always said we'd start a family when she turned 30. That milestone came and went, but instead of having kids with me, she chose to be with another man. I left the divorce papers on the kitchen table and disappeared from her life. When Claire realized what had happened, she blew up my phone with apologies and pleas, but I ignored her. Her friends called me a coward, saying I never loved her. The only person I called was the guy's wife, who promptly dumped him. Claire and her boyfriend got married a few months after our divorce was finalized. The last time I saw her was in court. She brought her boyfriend, who tried to intimidate me by flexing his muscles. I just shook my head. I wasn't interested in a confrontation. The judge granted a clean break. No alimony, no complications. Claire never looked at me, keeping her head down the entire time. I walked out of that courtroom a free man, but the emotional scars remained. Since then, I've dated casually and had a few flings, but nothing serious. I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone again. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage, as Claire disapproved of me having any friends. Facebook, once a part of my life, became irrelevant. I focused on rebuilding myself, both emotionally and financially. Fast forward 6 years, and I'm doing well. I have my own apartment, a stable job, savings, and a 401k. I'm content, if not entirely happy. Claire's memory still haunts me, but I've learned to live with it. Then, out of nowhere, she started texting me again. At first, her messages were friendly. "Hi, John, it's Claire. Long time no see. How are you?" I ignored her. The texts became more desperate. "John, I know I messed up. Can I call you?" She called me at least 10 times, but I never picked up. She tried every tactic, even involving mutual acquaintances. "John," mutual acquaintance, "said this is still your number. Please talk to me." She professed how much she missed me, claiming I was the only man who ever treated her well. Then she dropped the bombshell. "John, affair partner is such a bastard. He hurts me. I don't know what to do. I made the biggest mistake of my life throwing you away. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Despite her pleas, I ignored her. She listed various ways her new husband mistreated her, hoping to elicit some sympathy from me. But I was done being her safety net. I texted our mutual acquaintance, explaining Claire's situation and suggesting he contact the proper authorities if she was telling the truth. I made it clear I didn't care about Claire's fate anymore. The acquaintance called me a monster, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I logged into Facebook, only to find messages from people who once called me a coward, now blaming me for abandoning Claire in her time of need. They knew about her husband's abuse, so why weren't they helping her? I was just an ex-husband she had wronged. In a moment of clarity, I screenshotted all her recent texts and the old ones where she begged for forgiveness. I posted them on social media, exposing her lies. The backlash was immediate, but it eventually died down. Claire continued to text me, accusing me of never loving her and being a terrible person. I never replied. In the end, I found closure in a way. I felt liberated from the emotional chains Claire had placed on me. If she's reading this, I have one thing to say. Claire, you got what you deserved. The day Claire left her phone out was the day my life started spiraling into chaos. I remember it vividly, the way the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow on everything, making it seem like just another ordinary day. But it wasn't. Claire had gone to the bathroom, and her phone was on the counter, screen unlocked and open to a messaging app. A notification popped up, a text from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. What I saw made my heart stop. It was a naked selfie of Claire, sent to someone whose contact name I didn't recognize. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the conversation. There it was, in black and white, proof of her infidelity. She had been sexting and planning meetups with some guy from her gym. They had been intimate in our bed while I was at work, blissfully unaware. My initial reaction was shock. I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend how the woman I loved and trusted could betray me like this. The messages were explicit, filled with details of their encounters and plans for future rendezvous. It was a punch to the gut, and I struggled to breathe, feeling as though the air had been sucked out of the room. But instead of confronting her immediately, I did something that surprised even me. I took photos of the messages with my phone, documenting every detail. I knew I needed evidence, something concrete to protect myself if things got messy. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew I had to play this smart. When Claire came back from the bathroom, I acted as if nothing had happened. I couldn't let on that I knew. Over the next few days, I watched her closely, noting every little detail, every suspicious behavior. She was careful, but not careful enough. The lies she told me, the excuses for her absences, all started to make sense. The double yoga classes, the late-night outings with friends, everything fell into place. My nights were sleepless. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying our entire relationship in my mind. How had I missed the signs? Had she ever truly loved me? These thoughts tormented me, gnawing at my soul. I felt like a stranger in my own home, living with someone who had become a complete mystery to me. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, the weight of my discovery pressed down on me. I realized I couldn't continue living this lie. I needed to take action, but I wanted to do it on my terms. I began planning my exit, carefully considering every step. I contacted a divorce attorney, explained the situation, and got the ball rolling. I made sure I knew my rights and understood what I needed to do to protect myself. The next Saturday, Claire left for her double yoga class again. As soon as she was out the door, I sprang into action. I packed my belongings, taking only what I needed. My heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of determination. This was it. My chance to escape this nightmare and reclaim my life. I left the divorce papers on the kitchen table, a silent testament to my decision. As I drove away, a mix of relief and sorrow washed over me. I knew this was the right thing to do, but it didn't make the pain any less real. Claire's betrayal had shattered my world, but I was determined to pick up the pieces and start anew. When Claire returned home and found the papers, her reaction was explosive. She called me repeatedly, flooding my phone with messages and voicemails. She apologized, begged, and pleaded, but I ignored her. I had made up my mind. There was no going back. Her friends joined in, calling me a coward and a heartless monster, but their words didn't faze me. I knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. I contacted the guy's wife, providing her with the evidence I had gathered. She was devastated but grateful for the truth. She left him, just as I had left Claire. In a twisted way, it felt like justice had been served. Claire and her affair partner got married soon after our divorce was finalized. The only time I saw her again was in court, where she brought her new husband, who tried to intimidate me. But I felt nothing. I was done with her, done with the lies, and ready to move on. Looking back, that day in the kitchen was the inciting incident that set everything in motion. It was the moment my life changed forever, the catalyst for my journey of self-discovery and healing. And though it was painful, it was also necessary. Sometimes you have to go through the darkest times to find the light. After the divorce, my life took on a new, albeit uncertain, rhythm. I was single for the first time in years, navigating a world that felt both familiar and alien. My initial days of freedom were spent in a daze, reeling from the emotional whirlwind Claire's betrayal had unleashed. But slowly, determination began to replace the numbness. I was going to rebuild myself, no matter how daunting the task seemed. I threw myself into my work. The IT field had always been my sanctuary, a place where logic and order reigned supreme. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of my personal life. I worked long hours, taking on extra projects and responsibilities. My colleagues noticed my renewed fervor, though none dared to ask about the reason behind it. They could see the exhaustion etched on my face, the weariness in my eyes, but they respected my silence. Outside of work, I focused on rekindling old friendships. Claire had isolated me from my social circle, subtly discouraging my relationships with anyone who wasn't her. It was liberating to reconnect with friends I hadn't seen in years. They welcomed me back with open arms, offering support and understanding. We spent weekends reminiscing about the past, sharing stories, and rebuilding bonds that had long been neglected. Despite my efforts to move on, Claire's shadow loomed over me. Her narrative, that I was mentally abusive and drove her to cheat, had taken root among her friends and some of our mutual acquaintances. My social media was flooded with messages of condemnation and judgment. It was infuriating, but I knew engaging with them would only add fuel to the fire. Instead, I focused on what I could control, my own life and happiness. One evening, as I sat in my apartment scrolling through old photos, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from Claire. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from her since our court appearance. Her messages started off innocuously enough. "Hi John, it's Claire. Long time no see. How are you?" I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What did she want? Why now? I decided to ignore her, but Claire was persistent. Over the next few days, she bombarded me with texts and calls. Each message grew more desperate than the last. "I know I messed up. Can I call you?" "John, this is still your number, right? Please talk to me." The texts became increasingly frantic. She confessed that her new husband, the affair partner, was mistreating her. She detailed the ways he hurt her, both physically and emotionally. She claimed she had made the biggest mistake of her life leaving me and begged for my help. "John, affair partner, is such a bastard. He hurts me. I don't know what to do. I made the biggest mistake of my life throwing you away. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Reading her words, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to rush to her aid, to be the knight in shining armor I had once been. But another part of me was filled with anger and resentment. She had chosen this path. She had betrayed me. Why should I care what happened to her now? I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to a mutual acquaintance, someone who had also received Claire's frantic messages. I explained the situation and asked him to contact the authorities if her claims were true. I made it clear that I didn't want to get involved. I was done with Claire and her drama. The acquaintance, who had once called me a coward, responded with venom. He accused me of being a monster, an evil person for abandoning Claire in her time of need. His words stung, but I didn't care. I had my own life to live. For the first time in years, I logged into Facebook. My timeline was flooded with messages from people who had sided with Claire during our divorce. They berated me for abandoning her, calling me heartless and cruel. It was maddening. How could they expect me to care for someone who had betrayed me so deeply? In a moment of clarity, I decided to fight back. I screenshotted all of Claire's recent texts, as well as the old ones where she had begged for forgiveness. I posted them on social media, exposing her lies for all to see. The backlash was swift, but it was worth it. For the first time, people saw the truth. Claire's texts continued, filled with accusations and pleas. She accused me of never loving her, of being a terrible person. But I never replied. I was done with her manipulation. In the end, exposing Claire brought me a sense of closure. It was a twisted form of justice, but it was enough. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Claire's betrayal had left deep scars, but I was healing. Slowly but surely, I was finding my way back to myself. The climax of my story came like a storm, sudden and unavoidable. It had been 6 years since I left Claire, and life had settled into a comfortable, if lonely, routine. My career was thriving, and I had surrounded myself with supportive friends. I was finally in a good place. But just as I was beginning to feel whole again, Claire's messages shattered the peace I had worked so hard to achieve. It was a late Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with yet another notification from Claire. Her messages had become a daily nuisance, but this one felt different. The subject line read, "Please, John, I need you." Against my better judgment, I opened the message. Claire's words were a torrent of desperation and fear. She detailed the abuse she was suffering at the hands of her husband, describing in vivid terms the physical and emotional torment she endured. "John, he's hurting me again. Tonight was the worst it's ever been. I'm scared, I don't know where else to turn." Her words were a punch to the gut. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, and a deep-seated resentment. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her face the consequences of her choices. But another part of me, the part that had once loved her, couldn't turn a blind eye to her suffering. I called the mutual acquaintance I had previously contacted, explaining the urgency of the situation. He berated me for not doing more, for not stepping in to help Claire directly. His harsh words stung, but I knew getting involved personally would only drag me back into a dark place I had fought hard to escape. Fueled by a mixture of duty and residual affection, I made a decision. I called the police and reported Claire's situation, providing them with all the details she had sent me. I insisted on remaining anonymous, not wanting to rekindle any personal connection with her. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing I had done what I could without compromising my own sanity. But the drama was far from over. The next day I received a call from Claire. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but something compelled me to answer. Her voice was barely a whisper, fraught with pain and fear. "John, the police came last night. They took him away. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by a resurgence of anger. "Claire, this doesn't change anything between us. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." She sobbed, pleading for forgiveness, begging me to take her back. "John, I was so wrong. I see that now. Please, can we at least talk? Can we try to make things right?" Her words were like nails on a chalkboard. I clenched my jaw, struggling to keep my composure. "Claire, there's no going back. You destroyed everything we had. I've moved on, and you need to do the same." The line went silent, save for her quiet sobs. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry." I ended the call, my heart heavy but resolute. This was the closure I needed, the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I had done my duty, helped her in her darkest hour, but there was no room for her in my life anymore. The next few days were a blur. News of Claire's ordeal spread quickly, and my phone was inundated with messages from her friends and our mutual acquaintances. They praised me for my actions, calling me a hero, but their words felt hollow. I hadn't acted out of heroism. I had acted out of a sense of obligation, a need to do the right thing despite the pain it caused me. Claire continued to text me, thanking me, apologizing, and seeking reconciliation. I ignored her, knowing that any further interaction would only open old wounds. I had finally found peace, and I wasn't about to let her take that away from me again. One evening, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on the whirlwind of events, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Claire's husband's ex-wife, the one I had contacted years ago. She thanked me for my courage and for exposing the truth about her ex-husband. Her words were a balm to my soul, a reminder that I had made the right choice. The climax of my story was not a dramatic showdown or a grand revelation. It was a quiet, resolute decision to protect myself while still doing what was right. It was the culmination of years of pain and healing, a testament to my strength and resilience. And in that moment, I knew I had finally closed the chapter on Claire and our tumultuous past. After the harrowing climax of Claire's pleas and the police intervention, life began to slow down again, but it was far from peaceful. The fallout from the dramatic events lingered, creating ripples that I had to navigate carefully. Claire's friends and some of our mutual acquaintances continued to bombard me with messages, both of praise and condemnation. It was an exhausting balance between feeling vindicated and being reminded of the deep scars Claire had left on my heart. Every day, I received new notifications. Some people applauded my actions, calling me brave and selfless for helping Claire despite our tumultuous history. Others accused me of abandoning her when she needed me the most, still convinced by her manipulative narrative. The constant barrage of opinions was overwhelming, and I found myself retreating from social media once again. One evening, I received a message from the mutual acquaintance who had initially chastised me. His tone had softened, and he seemed to understand the gravity of what had happened. He apologized for his earlier harsh words and admitted that he had been wrong about me. We spoke at length, and he provided updates on Claire's situation. She had filed for a restraining order against her husband and was in the process of seeking therapy to deal with her trauma. Despite the closure I had felt, there was still a lingering sense of unfinished business. Claire's texts continued, although less frequent, filled with apologies and expressions of gratitude. I remained firm in my decision not to respond. Engaging with her would only dredge up old pain and complicate my journey toward healing. I had to stay focused on my own well-being. Work became my sanctuary once more. I immersed myself in projects, taking on more responsibilities and pushing myself to excel. My efforts didn't go unnoticed, and I was soon offered a promotion. The recognition was a welcome distraction, a reminder that I was capable and valued. It was a validation I desperately needed. Outside of work, I continued to rebuild my social life. I spent more time with friends, old and new, and began to enjoy activities I had once neglected. I joined a hiking group, rediscovering my love for the outdoors. The physical exertion and the beauty of nature provided a therapeutic escape from the chaos of my thoughts. One weekend, during a particularly challenging hike, I met someone who would change my perspective on love and trust. Her name was Emily, and she was a fellow hiker with a radiant smile and an infectious zest for life. We struck up a conversation, bonding over our shared love for nature and adventure. There was an immediate connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in years. As our friendship blossomed, I found myself opening up to her about my past. I shared my story, the betrayal, the pain, and the journey to reclaim my life. Emily listened with empathy, offering support without judgment. She understood the complexity of my emotions and didn't push for more than I was ready to give. Her presence was a breath of fresh air, a glimpse of hope in a future that had seemed so bleak. Our relationship grew slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. For the first time since Claire, I felt a glimmer of what it meant to truly connect with someone. Emily's kindness and understanding helped me heal in ways I hadn't thought possible. She never pressured me, allowing our bond to develop naturally. It was a stark contrast to the manipulation and deceit I had endured with Claire. Meanwhile, Claire's life continued to unravel. Mutual acquaintances occasionally updated me on her situation. She was attending therapy, trying to piece together the fragments of her shattered life. While part of me still harbored resentment, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. Claire's choices had led her down a dark path, and she was now facing the consequences. But that was her journey, and I had to focus on mine. As the months passed, Emily and I grew closer. She became a constant source of joy and stability, helping me navigate the complexities of my emotions. I began to see a future where I could love and trust again, a future where the shadow of Claire's betrayal no longer loomed over me. Emily's presence was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding happiness after heartbreak. One day, I decided to delete Claire's number from my phone. It was a symbolic act, a final step in letting go of the past. As I pressed the delete button, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer tethered to the pain and betrayal. I was free to move forward, to embrace the new opportunities that life had to offer. The falling action of my story was a period of reflection and healing. It was about finding strength in vulnerability and learning to trust again. Claire's betrayal had left deep scars, but with time and support, I was able to mend those wounds. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And as I looked toward the future, I felt a renewed sense of hope and possibility. Finally, I found peace in moving on from Claire's betrayal, fully embracing the new life I had built. Emily became an integral part of my journey, her love and support guiding me towards a brighter future. With her by my side, I learned to trust again and rediscovered the joy of genuine connection. Claire's presence faded into a distant memory, a chapter of my life that no longer defined me. In the end, I emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next with hope and resilience.